Welcome to this edition of Capital Dateline, the award-winning statewide public affairs show, reaching 6.4 million cable households on Fox Sports Sun. Capital Dateline brings you interviews with Florida's leaders, whose decisions and opinions touch your life every day, from the governor and legislative movers and shakers to the media and public educators. And now, the cable industry of Florida and the Florida Cable Telecommunications Association are pleased to bring you Capital Dateline.
Welcome once again to Capital Dateline, brought to you by Florida's internet and television industry, which employs over 100,000 men and women working around the clock to bring Florida the best in television and high-speed internet, serving over 6 million Floridians. I'm your host, Brad Swanson. We're coming to you from our headquarters located just a few blocks from Florida's capital. In this edition of our show, we'll review the biggest stories of 2016 and then take a look at the year ahead, and try to predict how the political winds of change will impact Florida's elected officials and how they govern. We'll then take you to Enterprise Florida's most recent meeting, where we caught up with Governor Scott on the latest new jobs numbers, Agricultural Commissioner Adam Putnam, Enterprise Florida's new leader, Chris Hart, and many more. In our first segment, we will look back at the biggest stories in 2016 and what may happen in 2017. Our guest will be Peter Schorsch, one of the best-known names in digital news coverage and commentary. He spearheads the Florida Politics News Organization and is the publisher of the St. Peter's blog. 2016 has been a tumultuous year in the Sunshine State. We will discuss how Florida lived through the tragedy of the Pulse nightclub shooting, which shook the nation, and how yet again Florida was a key national player in the election of part-time Florida resident Donald Trump. And we'll discuss how Governor Rick Scott was a high-profile and early supporter of Donald Trump, which should give Florida an advantage in federal relations. How the groundwork was being laid by many candidates who may run for governor and U.S. Senate in 2017, and how longtime Cuban dictator Fidel Castro died, leaving open the question of whether the softening of relations with Cuba will continue to benefit Florida. In Florida's capital, new leaders of the Florida legislature took power, bucked economic development funding, and promised to make big changes in higher education and lobbying reform. In our second segment, Capital Dateline traveled to the most recent meeting of Florida's Economic Development Agency, known as Enterprise Florida, where we captured insights and views from top political leaders in Florida as they look to 2017. We now go to the studios of the Florida Cable Telecommunications Association and our interview with Peter Schorsch. All right, Peter, thanks so much for joining us for the Christmas, New Year's edition of Capital Dateline.
Yes.
We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, but we're going to do a year in review.
Cool.
So let's start off the top. You know, the biggest story in Florida today, or this year, surely had to start with the Pulse shootings.
It was. One of the interesting things about all of the stories that we'll talk about was Florida was like emblematic of some of the big issues in the country, and one of them is the mass shootings that we've seen, and the tragedy at Pulse was probably the worst example that we've seen of that. Buddy Dyer almost was a statesman of the year in the way that he reacted to it. Orlando's still hurting from that. Like, if you go there, it's a gaping hole basically in this wonderful, magical, tourist-driven city. I don't know that they've fully recovered from that yet.
Yeah, I don't know how you ever recover from an episode like that. Boston certainly still carries those scars, but then they used it to rally the city as one unit. So it seems Orlando hopefully is taking the same page out of that book.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like Orlando also became known for something other than just Disney World. Right. I mean, people got to see that it is this vibrant community that's not just, it's a real city.
All right, so from the Pulse shooting to what seemed to eclipse every newscast for the entirety of the year, which was the election.
Yes.
Where do you want to start there?
Well, was it a surprise or not? I guess that's kind of the armchair quarterbacking we're doing now. It's how did we miss Donald Trump, especially in Florida? You know, one of the things that I've told people is I bet you could take the precinct data, for the foreclosure rate, and overlay it on where Trump picked up votes from Barack Obama. Yeah. I bet you they're identical. We should have been more in tune to how much people were still hurting from 2008, especially in a state that is still the worst in foreclosures. Yeah. We should have seen it. We should have seen Donald Trump coming quicker.
Well, I remember you and I having a conversation on election night, and the comment that came up was, if Donald Trump wins, the model is broken.
Yeah.
What I found interesting in the triage afterwards was for that election, in that one election, the model was broken. But if you look at the rest of the races and how the pollsters could see numbers playing out, other than a latent Trump effect, their models still seem to work pretty well. I mean, other than a few of the Trump swings.
Well, they worked especially well if you think about the popular vote. I mean, if Hillary Clinton was winning by 2 or 3 points nationally in most national polls, well, she's going to end up winning the popular vote by about 2.5 million votes.
They must have just been polling in LA and Chicago.
Right. The Electoral College was definitely one of the losers of the year.
Right.
If we're putting up people in those lists.
For sure. Well, let's move on to what certainly is the big story right now, Fidel Castro. That is one of those end of the year kind of biggies that apparently he's dead.
He is dead. That's breaking news. No, but it opens up. There's two different views on what to do here. This keep the hard line, which is what South Florida Cuban American exile community really wants to do. But in my neck of the woods, Tampa, we're hoping to get the consulate. We're hoping to have expanded trade there.
Right.
Kathy Castro, Charlie Crist, they talk about opening up more doors down in Cuba. So it's going to be very interesting, the policy debate going forward.
Tampa's been leading the way on that pro-relationship development. I wouldn't characterize it as pro-Castro because you have as many people participating that are opposed to the existing regime, but still continuing to opening relationships.
We've got the old cigar factories there. We've got a huge Cuban American community there. I would not be surprised if the consulate did end up in Tampa or even St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg has pitched very strongly for it.
Well, let's talk about a few items that aren't necessarily people related. They certainly affect people, but we had 2 agricultural issues. One was Zika, which affected people, and then also citrus greening. 2 that affect very different populations, but both considered agricultural hazard issues.
It's a reminder that behind tourism, agriculture is Florida's largest industry. And people forget that. John Morgan, who may run in a couple of years, kind of dinged Adam Putnam the other day. And it's a reminder how important that industry is. Zika was, again, that's emblematic of some of the things going on at the national level. The things that are coming in through globalization and the fears that people have about different parts of the world. And then also the citrus greening. I don't understand why people don't like orange juice more. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole community is being devastated, and it's one of the underwritten stories of the year. How much Florida's citrus industry has taken it in the gut this year.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's something that's so iconic with Florida, yet it is just wasting away due to the citrus greening behind the scenes. So we'll stay posted for that.
That's my loser. Worst fruit of the year is orange.
Yeah, that's because I assume strawberries are still
strawberries are still good.
Yeah, it's all good. All right, so on the commercial side, though, Miami dug out its trench in their port, so now they can take the post-Panamax vessels, which arguably is a boon for new jobs and increased trade in Florida.
Miami is so hot. I think that's one of the big trends this year is the rise of Florida cities, Jacksonville, Orlando, and Miami. Miami's really one of the major players in this global market. I mean, that sounds obvious, but we don't realize just how much flows through. You talk about Brazil, you talk about Argentina, you talk about the rise of South America and where that money goes to. It comes right in through the door through Miami. Right. And that's why their real estate market is booming. That's why Florida's economy has done so well. Yeah. Now, some of those countries are now having a little bit of problems, but the port is such a big success story for a governor who has pitched infrastructure as one of his main priorities.
Well, and it's interesting because when the state of Florida goes to market to Beijing and South America, all the other ports will go together, but they will market themselves as we're just next to Miami or we're just a little north of Miami because Miami is that globally recognized brand. All right, so from business success to storms that have crushed us, and then we've recovered, right?
Segue alert.
As good as I can get. So now we're into hurricanes. So they kind of showed the best and the worst of both Florida government infrastructure and Floridians as a whole.
Well, I think one of the people that's probably on a loser's list is Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum. He had a tough time reacting to the storm that came through here. But I think one of the winners was Rick Scott and how he had Florida prepared. He was very Jeb Bushian in the way that he responded to the storms that hit. Especially, St. Augustine was beaten up. And that's one of my favorite cities. They're still recovering. Anybody that's watching this during the Christmas time, get over there and see their holiday lights. That is one of our jewels here, and it's still like, it's devastated still.
Yeah, but thanks to the governor and Secretary Boxhold's work, they prioritized the rebuilding of A1A, and they knocked out a road in 2 weeks, which then begs the question, why can't they knock out the road in front of my house in 2 weeks?
Look for those in 2018. I can see the campaign commercials for Rick Scott for U.S. Senate, blue shirt, with him overlooking A1A where it was cratered out, talking about how he got Florida back to work.
Yeah, I think
after that storm.
That's going to be a great ad. So let's come back to the Capitol, right? The Senate at the beginning of the year was in a power struggle, but it seemed they resolved that, and now we've got President Negron and Senator Latvala, who have seemed to be reached a détente, if you will.
That was one of the stories we broke. It's one of my. I remember tweeting out Jack Latvala concedes the Senate presidency race. The Florida Senate's in an interesting conundrum right now because it is having to react to Richard Corcoran, who is really riding the whirlwind in the Florida House, and you've got a very. I think the Senate has kind of lost some of the. It's lost its hand with how it's dealing with the Florida House. I'll do one prediction for 2017. Session's not going to end on time.
Yeah,
it's going to be ugly up there.
Well, before we get to 2017, let's start. So Speaker Corcoran, before he took power last year, made the two issues happen. One, he said EFI. We've made our stance and we're going to hold the line. And the ultimate result was the Senate and the House couldn't agree on funding for Enterprise Florida.
Right.
And then the other one was the famous speech about no Gucci loafers. They're persona non grata in the Capitol.
Are we wearing those?
I'm wearing Cole Haans.
Okay,
I'm Cole Haans now. So.
No, Richard Corcoran has said he doesn't want any money going. No money to billionaires, and that's for stadiums. That's for film incentives. And that's not for companies relocating. The EFI fight is a big one because that's obviously a priority for Governor Scott. And the Senate wanted to give some money there as well. But he has drawn a line in the sand, and $1 is a dollar too many for him. But then I look at it yesterday, the news came out that Ballers, that great HBO show, is moving from Miami to California because the state of California put together an incentives package there. We've seen films about Tampa shot in Atlanta, and it's just, I think I got to say that's one of those issues where I really disagree with Speaker Corcoran. I think the film incentives are something that we should be doing, but I do agree with him. I don't think you should be giving taxpayer dollars to billionaire sports owners.
Well, we'll see how the EFI conversation proceeds. They've got a new president. Chris Hart just announced yesterday, CEO and president of Enterprise Florida, former House member. Ran Career Source also.
It has a great track record at Career Source. I mean, this is one of those, I think this may be one of the best picks that Rick Scott's made.
Yeah.
I think he's going to get, I genuinely believe he's going to get a lot done there. I don't want to say he's a rising star because he's got the resume already, but he gives off the air that he's got another 20, 30 years in this process. Chris Hart is definitely one of the people to watch in the next year and a half.
All right, so woman or man of the year, who, if you had to pick one or two, who do you like?
If I was thinking politician of the year, where I would go, I would probably say Lenny Curry, the mayor of Jacksonville. He's my choice for politician of the year. Took a courageous stand on the pension tax issue that bedevils the city of Jacksonville, and got that through, risked all sorts of political capital. But I also put some of the other mayors there, Buddy Dyer with the Pulse reaction, Philip Levine in Miami Beach with what he's done to raise awareness on climate change. Bob Buckhorn has done a great job in Tampa. So if there is a person of the year, it's Florida mayors at this point.
Yeah, all right, well, so we have a lot of tragedy, we have a lot of controversy with elections, but yet Florida was still able to pull off a TPC tournament in Jacksonville, Daytona 500. Some of the events that makes Florida special. What's the event that you go to every year and that somebody should think about going to next year?
Well, I don't know if it's going to be every year, but I'm looking forward to the national championship
Yeah.
in Tampa. I think that right now we're college football hungry at a national level. It's like having a mini Super Bowl here. I'd keep an eye on that one. That's going to be a really exciting event down at Raymond James Stadium.
Prediction, back to politics for 2017. What do you see as the top 1 or 2 issues grabbing the oxygen in the legislature next year?
There's a bunch of dry policy stuff like workers' comp, EFI funding, et cetera. I think one of the things that's going to be driving the day is everybody's 2018 ambitions. When does Rick Scott get in? How serious is Gwen Graham? What is Richard Corcoran, Jack Latvala, Will Weatherford? That's going to be, 2018 is already here. I mean, there was a poll out already today about it. That's really going to drive a lot of the conversation. And again, I would say my prediction is I think the way that Richard Corcoran has framed the budget debate out of the House, he's really stuck it in the eye of the Senate. I don't think that ends well.
Well, we'll look to see how that plays out. We'll certainly tune into Florida politics and Sunburn, and we'll look for our next copy of Influence magazine. When's that one coming out?
It is our Christmas special. It's going to come out, I think it's going to be on stands December 17th.
Fabulous. Peter, thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
taking time to spend with us, and we'll look forward to having you on soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.